This conversation dragged on for quite a while, and so far the girl had not found out what she had planned to. Realizing that she wouldn't let up and would continue to pursue the answer she wanted, David became more talkative and admitted he hadn't thought the girl would be so persistent. At this point, he even liked her behavior, and finally decided to reveal a secret about his acting. In the meantime, so as not to waste time in useless speculation and trying to get some explanation from him, she told him plainly he had one last chance to answer her question. David didn't resist, and said that since he had nothing more to hide, he didn't need anything but one thing to do. Beloved girl the Empress insisted upon, she ordered him to marry and find for himself one who would be his wife. She's really into the business, and what's most offensive to him is that the Empress chooses a candidate based on her own tastes. She doesn't care what kind of girl David has in mind, or if he has feelings for the one she chooses for him. And therein lies the biggest problem. Accordingly, if the Empress chooses someone at her discretion, the guy can't refuse it. So in order to avoid an imposed relationship and not real feelings, you have to get ahead of her and marry a girl he will love for real. There is another way out of this situation. So as not to marry a spy the Empress proposes, David can propose a sham marriage to someone of his own choosing. So since the guy told Eileen about it, it's possible that she's the one he's planning to pitch the idea to. Since he didn't even hide the fact that he thinks she's a pretty girl and wouldn't mind a relationship, the reason for this conversation is pretty obvious. The girl realizes it and probably wouldn't mind. But no matter how handsome he is, it's a huge risk. Not only for her, but also for the children, for if the girl attracts the Empress's attention, her displeasure may affect those whom Eileen holds dear. It's such a difficult and responsible and complex choice that her decision could be a mistake either way. It just depends on whether the Duke will retaliate if she does refuse, which is likely. If Eileen was sure she was safe and that she wouldn't regret her decision, she would have agreed to it a long time ago, but so far no one's given her that kind of assurance or promise. Meanwhile, the girl had already gone outside, and from the looks of it, she asked to be given some time to think. It would have been very difficult to make a choice right after the proposal, and luckily the guy was okay with waiting a while. The only problem is that she has very little reason to start trusting this man. She knows nothing about his real intentions, and how quickly she would regret her agreement if she did decide to help him in this situation. I wonder how long it will take her to decide, because at any moment, the Empress could find another girl for him. And as everyone knows, the only reason the Empress wants a bride for the Duke is to use her as a spy. Now it's clear why the guy chose Eileen for this role, because she doesn't communicate with the Empress and won't tell her information that could hurt David. When suddenly, as soon as the girl returned to the mansion, she saw something that surprised her very much. There were several women standing at the entrance trying to find out something from one of the maids. After a moment's thought, Eileen walked over to them, introduced herself, and asked what was going on here. She was madly curious to know the reason why these girls were in the palace and what they were after. Fortunately, they did not hide this information and immediately explained that they had come to see the principal. But at this point, the girl hinted that they could talk to her about it. She promised to honor any request or information they might want to give them. Surprisingly, they agreed to these terms and only asked for one thing: to give the princes an invitation to some dinner. At that moment, Eileen remembered it all at once. She didn't understand how she could have forgotten it at all. A dinner that princes would want to be invited to, a special dinner that only happens once a year. His hostess, a lady. She is a socialite and a very famous personality in the restaurant business of the empire. Each family presents special drinks and delicacies prepared according to secret recipes. In the original story, the twins were invited to this dinner, but one of the aristocrats, due to the fact that he lost control of his mind and actions, injured Evan. It was an accident, which the girl remembers very well and understands very well. Unfortunately, the situation is inevitable. There is no way she can change the course of events to impress the Empress, who despises the entire imperial family, except the crown prince. The lady deliberately invited the princes to dinner and disguised the incident as a fight between the twins. But at the same time, there's something odd about this situation. That incident happened in the spring when the princes were 8 years old. Accordingly, Eileen didn't understand why it happened 10 months earlier. Could it be that the original story might have changed a bit? Because of the fact that she met David, and after that, all the subsequent events happened differently than in the original story. Evening had come, and of course, nothing else appears in her thoughts but doubt, and the realization of how much her life might change depending on the decision of the. Even when the kids are around and need to be taken care of, the girl is not with them mentally. But at the same time, so responsible she is for their safety as well. Also, if she refuses the lady's invitation, the lady will tell the empress that their plan failed, which means the empress will want to get rid of the young princes some other way. And all because she has a huge fear that they'll have special powers. It's enough to make a girl prioritize their safety. She's determined to stop all those nightmares from happening in real life. At least she's doing her best to do so. Even though she doesn't have enough power and no concrete plan of action yet, she has to do it anyway. Meanwhile, the Duke is in his study consulting with his aide as usual. He's looking at some paper with Eileen's picture on it. But besides the picture, there's some text written next to it. It's very similar to her bio and specific information about who she is and more. The lad learned that the girl came to the palace at the age of 12 and became a maid, with a strong desire for power. She always strove to preserve the dignity of the imperial family, and in doing so tried to educate the young princes, even though they were difficult characters. Despite this information, the Duke's aide still sees some kind of trick in her behavior and believes that she is not what she seems at first glance. She arouses his suspicions, and even the thought that Eileen might be a spy for the empress. To which the Duke replied that he would believe these words only after the aide had provided solid proof. But in the meantime, he decided to tell him something. He told of his sensations, namely, that it affects him very well. When he eats cooked food, he feels better than ever, lighter and much better than he was before. Without thinking long, the assistant offered an alternative. Instead of taking her as his wife, he offered to hire her as a cook, and afterwards asked him another question, whether the Duke really wanted to make her his lover only because of the empress's plan, or whether he really had feelings for her. The assistant is sure that if the guy answers this question, they will be able to solve their problem and understand whether it is mandatory to marry a suspicious maid or not. Once again, despite these words against Eileen, the guy sticks to his opinion and is sure that this girl is exactly what he needs. The food she cooked him brings back memories from his childhood. It is very similar to the meals his own mother used to cook for him. She also tried very hard for him and did it with love. This woman, the empress, was considered a strange person by the people. When she was alive, the woman impersonated another person and often prepared food that was unrecognizable to the people. But unfortunately, as time went on, she got worse and worse to him, and each time her food was less tasty. On his 3rd birthday, she made green soup for him, which was the most disgusting meal of his entire life. The boy never understood at what point his mother began to hate him, and what he had done so badly for her. Perhaps it was for this reason that when he tasted Eileen's delicious food for the first time in a long time, he remembered those wonderful times with his mom when she loved him, and he had a happy childhood. Though it didn't move for very long, the girl managed to bring him back to that wonderful time and remind him how good it was then. So as cruel as his decision may seem, he decided to catch her before she could or wanted to escape. It was at this very moment, as soon as the Duke had uttered this phrase, being at a great distance from him, that the girl seemed to feel and have a strange sensation of a. She has no idea what this incredible coincidence and sensation she experienced in that moment means. The next day came, and first thing in the morning, Eileen was in a great mood, and there's a reason for that. Today is the long-awaited day when she should be rewarded for her work, and it couldn't be happier. She has been waiting for this for a long time, and the first thing she plans to spend this money on is grocery shopping. She really wants to cook something delicious for the children. But at one point, Eileen quite by chance overheard a conversation between strangers who were discussing the young lady who would become a great duchess, which means someone already knows the identity of the girl the empress chose for the Duke. These girls even know that that lady has agreed to meet the Duke tomorrow in the garden and even plans to stay at the castle for a few days. If the girl got it right, she had almost no time left to finally make her decision and tell the Duke about it. If she doesn't do it by tomorrow, it'll be too late. The Duke's wife will be another girl, and Eileen won't be able to help him. But the only thing that confuses her is how he could have arranged to meet another girl, since he'd recently asked Eileen to accept his proposal. It's really weird that a guy would go on a date with another girl, even though he's trying to avoid it. Meanwhile, in the garden, the very same date is taking place. The girl is the first to introduce herself and greet her potential husband. At least she would have liked him to be. She said she was very happy to see him. But the weird thing was, from the looks of it, her moves looked like she had rehearsed them beforehand. It's obvious that the girl is trying too hard to please him and is doing her best to look better than she really is. The second the guy regretted agreeing to this meeting at all, as suddenly, by some miracle, he was saved. The thing is, it was at this point that Eileen decided to help him after all. She said his name very loudly and tried to draw attention to herself. She knew the guy would definitely be happy to see her, but for some reason, her behavior seemed quite different from what it looked like to want to help him out. Instead of just joining the conversation and introducing herself as his fiancée, she started accusing him of betrayal and embellished her surprise with tears. Eileen ignored the other girl's presence, and instead of telling or explaining anything, she hugged him and began to cry even harder, very curious how sincere this emotion was, because so far, it was very difficult to understand it. We can assume that she's doing this acting scene on purpose, and by talking about a 3-year relationship, the girl is just trying to help him. As the Duke looks at her with surprised eyes, Eileen continues to recall fictionalized beautiful moments in their relationship that she doesn't want to lose. Because of this girl she saw her lover with at this moment. In fact, she's really good at it. The important thing is that he supports the idea and doesn't resent the fact that her words have nothing to do with reality. Really curious how he'll react to that. So far, he's noticed her wearing jewelry and gifts he recently gave her. The guy started to smile sincerely. Apparently, he was very pleased to see that the girl had accepted these gifts and was wearing them with pleasure. After that, the fun part started. David explained that he was just talking to this girl, and it had nothing to do with him wanting to end their relationship. He introduced her as an acquaintance who couldn't possibly be the one he'd trade his beloved, that is, Eileen, for. Those words caused that girl a great deal of surprise and hatred. At this moment, he has absolutely no interest in it. The only girl whose mood and smile he was interested in was Eileen. He looked into her eyes and said a few nice words. That she was the only one he would love for the rest of his life, and after that, that girl couldn't hold back and didn't even hide her indignation. She was so unpleasant and unexpected to hear that after a few minutes she fainted and began to fall to the floor. She was caught by one of the maids, of course, but even so, David and Eileen didn't even pay attention. They keep pretending like they really love each other. And from the outside, everyone around them actually believed it was true. Their looks and words seemed so real that it was simply impossible to doubt the sincerity of their behavior. I really wonder if this fictional relationship will become real, or if they will never really fall in love with each other until the end of the fake marriage period. Except, judging by their looks and behavior when they hug or say something about how they feel, we can assume that the likelihood of them having a real relationship and genuine feelings is much greater than the likelihood that it will never happen. Mania, the disease that caused David to be deprived of his throne. To hasten his madness, the emperor made an ancient contract with David. The contract will only be cancelled if the guy's insanity passes. This contract is like a leash. If only the emperor says so, the guy dies or disappears. But if the madness passes and the promises are not kept, the emperor dies instead of David. Meanwhile, to continue the impression of being in love, the guy and the girl went to the Imperial Cafe. They made reservations and decided to talk about the recent act in the garden. While waiting for the first courses, to avoid an awkward silence, the Duke began to compliment the girl on her appearance. He was genuinely surprised that she wore the dress she had been given as a gift. And afterward, David thanked her for her timely appearance and unexpected help, without which he would have long ago become that girl's husband. For some reason, instead of keeping the dialogue going, Eileen makes it seem like she's done him a favor and expects some sort of thanks. She looks at him like she's waiting for an apology or some action that might suit her after the effort she made a while ago. To avoid a pointless conversation, the Duke asks bluntly whether or not she would consent to be his wife. Eileen, of course, realizes that by the word beloved, he means fake feelings, but even so, she wanted to set a condition before giving her consent. Girl asked him to become guardian for the twin brothers, and in order that the Empress might not try to harm them. And of course the guy couldn't refuse, as he realizes he has no other choice. That way, if he becomes their guardian, no one will dare harm the children or even say a bad word to them. Is the best guarantee of their safety, of which there can now be no doubt, lest the Empress should wish to take revenge on her personally. As she can't harm the children, it's more likely that the woman's attention may shift to the Duke's future wife. And since the Empress's only mission is to ruin David's life and everyone he cares about, she'll find a way to make it happen. In any case, the guy will protect not only the kids, but his wife as well, at least because of the fact that if the girl feels safe, she has the right to change her mind at any time and annul this contract. The Duke understands it very well, and obviously so that there is a benefit to each of them in this marriage. He will be able to keep her and the twins safe. As a result, everyone has said their own terms, expectations, and preferences for future life together. As soon as the girl had heard all she wanted to hear, she began to rejoice conventionally as a child. But at that moment, as it turned out, the conversation was not over. David waited for the right moment and suggested that things should be as fair as possible. So, he decided to add his stipulation as well. Eileen had so many options, concerns, and thoughts that she couldn't imagine that this request would turn out to be so inoffensive the guy wanted. He only ate food prepared by her personally, no matter how strange it sounded. There really was a reason in those words. And most importantly, the girl will be obliged to do it every day, and she has no right to refuse for any reason. From what he said, Eileen concluded that he liked that soup too much. But even so, she came up with a plan to get around that condition. The girl thought it would be possible to cook him unpalatable meals on purpose so that he would refuse them himself. I wonder where this will end up, but for now they've happily agreed and plan to sign a contract. On the face of it, it should be beneficial for each of them. But how things actually turn out is up to them. After that, the Duke called his assistant, who appeared as if from nowhere, and was ready to prepare all the necessary documents. After a while, Eileen noticed a very interesting clause. It stated that when someone wanted to break up, they would say goodbye quietly, and there would be no problem with that. It will be necessary in case one of them meets his true love, so that no one will have to feel guilty because everyone was warned about it before signing the contract. But there's one thing that could go wrong, and the twins' safety could be in doubt. The point is to protect the princes, and after a time, they were not in danger. We'll have to do everything possible so that the Duke did not fall in love with the protagonist of the original story. The protagonist and the protagonist remain together, respectively, to allow this is not possible. And what's even worse, the guy starts a massive conflict that, according to the plot, could engulf the entire continent. If this is the case, there is no telling what will happen to the children, so it is necessary to at least find him a girl who is not related to the Empress in any way, as kind, wise, and beautiful as the protagonist. It will be the best option that will keep everyone happy except the Empress. Only then, after the breakup, the girl will be calm and not worry about anything. As suddenly the above conditions were not enough for her, the girl decided to inquire if he wished to add anything to the. It was a very unexpected suggestion on her part, but in reply, the boy, as usual, made a puzzled expression on his face and said nothing. He silently asked for his copy of the contract and signed this very important document for him and the girl. Because from that moment, you cannot be afraid and confidently call them husband and wife. Only the fact that this marriage is not real, only they and their assistant will know. To all other people who learn the news, the event will seem no different from a normal marriage ceremony with sincere feelings and love. After the so-called date, each of them was very tired, so the newlyweds decided to go on vacation. The The girl held out her hand to him as a farewell, and thanks for their time together. She's very pleased to know that the Duke trusts her even more than some of the people in his circle. So she shows him her respect and hope that they each get their own benefit and get rid of the problem. With this contract, not only will they solve most of their problems, but maybe they'll see each other as real husband and wife. But for now, they only seem like newlyweds in love to the people around them who see it as a real relationship. They're so perfect in this role that people have absolutely no doubt or suspicion that these two are trying to deceive them. Their behavior on the street is so elaborate that even chatting afterwards and looking into each other's eyes, it looks like a real relationship. In the meantime, evening had come, and the stars appeared in the sky. But unfortunately, the peace and quiet of the palace did not come. Here, as usual, not without conflict and shouting, which comes from the Empress's study, one of the maids made her nervous again, and surely, as usual, the Empress herself had invented and created the conflict. She began to abuse her, and when the maid asked her to stop and apologized, it made her mistress even angrier. Everything so brutal that the maid just couldn't help herself and started screaming very loudly in pain. It really was unbearable. And the most unpleasant and terrible thing is that even if someone wanted to help or thought about helping, these people were simply afraid not to intervene in the situation because they realized that the same thing could happen to them. It turns out that the maid has told the Empress unpleasant news, and that is the only reason why, in the Empress's opinion, her assistant deserves such treatment. It's completely abnormal and horrible of her, but unfortunately, no one has the power to stop her or explain that she's wrong. The news that the woman didn't like was about Eileen. The Empress is aware of their relationship, and that's why it made her so angry. The girl simply spoiled her plans, which had never happened before. There was no situation where someone would dare to spoil the Empress's plans in such a way. And when a woman hears the information that Eileen is a lovely girl and well-suited to be the Duke's wife, it's obvious from her reaction that everything is obvious. It seems she has no intention of backing down and will try to do it her way anyway, reminding her that no one has the right to spoil her mood and do what is against her plans. Even though it's wrong, the Empress has never cared about it. Even when the situation or decision doesn't concern her, there's no problem with it for her. She never let anyone disregard her opinion, or at least consult with her. It's very important for her to be the center of attention, and most importantly, to always be the way she wants it to be. Except that, more often than not, instead of normal advice, she says and orders you to do things that only harm or are the opposite of what the person planned to do. Before, she was quite different. The Emperor loved his wife very much and admired her, but only until, when he stopped recognizing her, she developed an unbearable temper and became impossible to live with. She deliberately started ruining other people's lives. A few years ago, she came up with a horrible plan. The Empress tried to get rid of and destroy the Duke with a spell from a forbidden book, but at some point, she made a mistake, and David became insane. Even though she wanted him to, it turns out she's not happy with the fact that he lost the title of Crown Prince and is still alive. After a little reflection on recent events, the Empress concluded that perhaps the maid he had fallen in love with was not what she might seem at first sight. At this point, she'd finally decided there was no turning back, and of course, she remembered the twin brothers. She knows they are invited to an upcoming event, which means she will have the opportunity to get revenge on one of them, either the girl or the kids. At this moment, she suddenly began to smile, and her mood turned out, proof that she was pleased by other people's troubles, especially when they happen because of her. And of course, if those troubles happen to people who know or socialize with Duke, when suddenly, she purposely threw a glass on the floor, broke it, and for some reason ordered a pen and paper to be brought in. She's obviously up to something, and from the look on her face, someone the Duke cares about is going to be in trouble soon. Eileen, of course, suspected that the news of her marriage to the Duke would not please the Empress, but she had no idea how much it would make her angry. The woman is determined not only to intervene and prevent them from enjoying life, she wants to make the two of them regret their decision and beg her for mercy. In the meantime, she decided to check on her own son before she started this case. She's much nicer to him than she is to David, and everyone knows it. She's very happy to see him, and as usual, the woman tells him everything that bothers or displeases her. For his part, the guy is always happy to help his mother. I really wonder if he'll try to stop her before the woman ruins David and Eileen's lives. They don't owe her anything, much less ask her opinion on whether they can get married or anything like that. At one point, she notices the presence of someone she's clearly not happy about, and her mood and smile immediately disappear. But did she get so angry at the appearance of her youngest son? She looked in his direction, and the second she did, she got very nervous. The boy felt the most embarrassed possible. It must be very hurtful for him to hear such words from his own mother. Especially after he saw her joyful look towards her older brother, it's very unfair and wrong on her part. But in any case, her reaction and behavior is no surprise to anyone. Everyone is used to it long ago. It seems she clearly hates him for something. The woman doesn't even hide her attitude towards her youngest son, even in the presence of strangers. It is impossible to imagine what emotions and feelings the younger prince feels at this moment. Unfortunately, he has to get used to and accept such attitude to himself. Except that once the boy grows up and wants revenge for his mother's horrible childhood, there's a very good chance he's been through too much, and that's something he'll never forget and will remember for the rest of his life. The Empress not only shows her bad attitude towards him, but also considers it normal to tell him directly that he is superfluous, or, for example, that no one needs him. These are the worst words a child can hear from his mother, and it's incredibly frustrating that at this point, the older son has no idea what it's like to be in his little brother's shoes. He is constantly humiliated. He hears insults every day, and thus his self-esteem has been destroyed since childhood. It's amazing that after all that he had to endure, he grew up to be a very kind man who still hopes to hear from his mother that she loves him, or at least apologizes to him. Meanwhile, Eileen's not idle. She's found binoculars, and for some reason she's looking through the window. The girl decided to watch someone, and once her assistant asked what she needed it for, she never gave any details. As suddenly, she did see something that made her either happy or very nervous. Her reaction looked a little too. Only one thing could be said. Eileen was obviously expecting a man to appear, but so far the assistant had not been able to find out his identity. It turns out that a carriage has arrived at the mansion. We can only hope that it doesn't contain the Empress, who intends to take revenge on Eileen at the very least. She is a very unpredictable person from whom you never know what you can expect. But since the girl was so brave to go out to meet this person, there must be someone else in the carriage. David had come out of her, and now I could see why she had been so excited to see him, and after a few seconds, had managed to run from her room straight to him. Eileen is so happy in this moment that it seems as if she has come down to meet a truly loved one. As it turned out, it wasn't the guy she was most interested in, but the envelope she saw in his hands. The girl tried to grab it, but the Duke reacted in time and prevented her from doing so. Really, she knows what's inside and wants to make sure of it as soon as possible. Once she started failing, it made her nervous and feel a little powerless. She expected to snatch the sheet, but David beat her to it, for he suspected that she would want it. To make up for her fault, the girl tried to take her mind off that sheet of paper and pretended it wasn't the only thing she was interested in. She continued to hug him, but at the same time, she really hoped he wouldn't take this behavior as too inappropriate. But luckily it all worked out. The Duke is very happy to see his bride and surprisingly didn't dwell on the situation. At that moment, the girl regretted her behavior, and instead of greeting the groom, she turned her attention to what was in his hands. So, she's very grateful for his normal reaction. And after something like this, she was expecting a completely different reaction. Since there are too many people around, they had to get into character and keep hugging for a while longer. As suddenly, Eileen became very embarrassed and asked him to stop, but his reply was that that was the condition of the contract. They will have to do their best to keep any rumor or suspicion from the Empress about their relationship. After this, some time passed, and the Duke at last gave her this mysterious envelope. He allowed her to look at it and take her hands of the... It turns out that the girl felt that this was a very important document, and that's why she was so interested to look into it. It says the Duke agrees to be the guardian of the twin brothers until they come of age. This document is stamped and is the official proof of guardianship from that day forward. And of course, it's exactly what she dreamed of so much. And now, the kids can say goodbye to this hectic and hard life. From this day forward, it will be much calmer and safer for each of them. But the boys don't even know it yet. She was very interested to see their reaction, but before she went to cheer them on, Eileen thanked the Duke, for she realized how difficult it had been. To which the guy replied that since she liked everything, he wanted to ask her to listen to his request as well. Eileen is so happy in this moment that she is willing to agree to absolutely any request. Then David took advantage of her good mood and suggested they move into his castle and live there together. His fiancée agrees, and literally right after that she starts to realize what she just agreed to. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but she wasn't prepared for this outcome of this conversation. Eileen can't imagine how she would tell the twins about it. The Duke explained that he had always disliked and was sad to see her and the princes living in that cold palace. So now that they're husband and wife, this seems like the best option for him, so everyone's comfortable. Of course, some people overheard this conversation, and not surprisingly, after that, they went straight to spreading new rumors. At this point, the guy noticed the behavior of the people around him, and as soon as everyone scattered, he got a smile. The girl took it as another acting performance, and I thought it was more likely that he specifically said he was moving, and it had nothing to do with his sincere proposal. As suddenly, David said that his words were totally serious and it wasn't a joke. Besides, he sees no reason for her to give it up. The most important thing is that in his castle, the children will be completely safe. The Empress has no access to it. Therefore, one problem will be less. Eileen understands perfectly well that the guy is right, but it has become too difficult for her to give her consent. The fact is that once the girl moves into his castle, she, as well as the children, will be perfectly safe. She can forget about the Empress, and she'll never even see it if she wants to, so it's a very tempting and yet incredibly responsible decision. While the girl decides and can't make up her mind, David says she's thinking too much and the choice is obvious. The two of them understand perfectly well that there is no flaw in this proposal and idea. And finally, Eileen promised that she would try to talk to the kids and convince them that it was a good idea. After getting her hopes up, the guy suggested that they go to a party together, to which the twin brothers were invited. He thinks it would be a good idea to go there together and take this opportunity to show up together again. Eileen certainly thought about hiding behind David and declining the invitation, but if that happened, it would be difficult for princes to enter secular society until adulthood. Since she would have had to attend such an event sooner or later anyway, it's better to do it now. Plus, at the event you can announce that the Duke has become the children's guardian. There will be a lot of people there, and that's a very good thing. The guy supported the idea and once again reminded that they should take advantage of any opportunity by which the Empress would find out about their relationship. And the more she's told about it, it means only one thing. They're executing the plan, and everything is happening exactly as the Duke has planned. Due to the way things are going, the plan will come to fruition much sooner and better than he could have planned for himself. Eileen is great at what she does, and most importantly, she asks for almost nothing in return. All that matters to her is the safety of the children and asking to be a guardian for them. David as something difficult or something he wouldn't want to do for her, when suddenly, once again, he demonstrated and proved the fact that he had and still had feelings for her. If this sham marriage was really fake, he would never kiss a girl he's only in a business relationship with. We can assume that after a while, the Duke won't hide his true feelings for Eileen, and at last admits that this active marriage was not proposed merely to settle some trouble with the Empress. Since the Duke could have proposed a sham marriage to any other girl, but proposed it to Eileen, there can be only one explanation. In this way, he tried to get close and do his best to get her to be near him as often as possible. And gradually, she fell in love with him as much as he did. Even though the guy still hasn't been able to tell her, he's gonna do it sooner or later. He doesn't know that the girl also starts to admire his looks more and more often, and notices that she likes to be around him. So it's possible that a sham marriage will soon become a real marriage. There's little doubt about that. Meanwhile, David needed to leave urgently on some business, so he said goodbye and promised he'd be back soon. Left alone, the girl had so many thoughts and realizations that it became simply impossible to believe that all this was not a dream. She has only one thing left to do: talk to her kids about it and explain it's a very good idea and the only option to stay safe. Returning home, she went straight to their room, but at that moment, the girl met one of them in the hallway. The boy happily reported that he had managed to swim on his own, to which the girl replied that she was very proud of him. She is genuinely happy in those moments when one of them smiles, for when they first met, these children were far from unhappy. She taught them to enjoy life and made them realize that everyone's life depends on them, not on anyone else. If they are surrounded by someone who is unsafe or unwilling to be around them, that person should be excluded from their social circle. But since the twins are still very young, they have the perfect opportunity to become so that they will not be afraid of anyone, and as adults, they can avenge their torment. Not to delay the moment, Eileen asked him how much they liked being and living in this house. The boy replied that they were used to this mansion and, on the whole, they were happy with everything here, if only it were not for the adults, with the appearance of whom they became very afraid and felt guilty. Afterward, the boy asked her to follow him, and saying he wanted to show her something secret, he took her by the hand. And they head off to some room. Eileen has no idea that the prince wants to show her something she may still not know about. The child walked over to the dresser and started pulling something out of the lowest drawer. He even hinted that there was something hidden here. And after that, he pulled out some huge bottle. Looking at it, the boy started smiling and remembering his mom. He told me that this bottle contains grape juice that his mom once made. He still hadn't tasted it and decided to keep it as a memento. Since many years have passed since that time, the juice may have already spoiled and it is undesirable to drink it. But even so, they kept the bottle and decided they would keep it for the rest of their lives. Eileen realized that if the prince showed her this secret, it was an indicator of how much he trusted her. She felt incredibly pleased. Every time the kids think of that bottle, they miss their mom a lot. She was the only person who was nice to them until they met Eileen. Luckily, the girl, though a little, still managed to bring happiness back into their lives after her death. Until this moment, the girl was sure, most likely, the boys must hate this mansion, because here they had to suffer torment and humiliation literally every day. And the most important reason she thought they should want to leave this place: the death of their mother. At this point, the boy's brother walks into the room, and as usual, he's not thrilled about the topic being discussed in this room. Unlike his brother, he still can't enjoy life. It's very difficult for him to smile and be polite to people. Even though Eileen realizes it, it's very hard for her to watch a child who is having a very hard time without his dead mother, who is having a very hard time living in a world he stopped trusting years ago. He thinks it's pointless to talk about someone who's long gone and impossible to get back. The mere mention of her makes him very nervous, as suddenly, he asked his brother to come over to tell him that he thought Eileen had started this conversation for a reason. He's sure the girl's been planning to get rid of them for a long time and wants to give them to someone else. The boy even ordered her out of this room and asked her never to come back here again. At this point, the girl realized everything. She was almost certain that the child had heard the custody conversation with the Duke. Apparently, he had just misunderstood her when she had talked to David about it. Maybe he was standing nearby and heard their whole conversation. Maybe he really did misunderstand her, and that's why he got so angry. The boy warned her that if she did not go, they were going. He told her so firmly and confidently of it, that initially the girl was even a little scared. She had never seen him so much, so not to spoil his mood, she agreed to leave. Right after that, she said goodnight to them and began to hope that the next day she would have a chance to explain everything. It's very frustrating for her to realize that one of them stopped trusting and thought she might have actually done that to them, when in fact she didn't. She couldn't even say anything back. Eileen's not guilty of anything, but it turns out she's going to have to prove it. The situation was such that each of them misunderstood the other, and, as a result, there was a conflict. Back in her room, Eileen regretted very much that she hadn't thought about the fact that one of the twins might hear her talking about custody when she'd been talking about it. Unfortunately, that's what happened. Even though she didn't mean any harm, and on the contrary wanted to ensure safety, one of the princes just misheard everything. She thought everything would be fine, and she would just have to convince them about the move and the guardian. But the girl didn't know there would be such a misunderstanding. Anyway, now that she had some free time, she remembered the party invitation. Considering that this invitation was sent to her, the Empress clearly had something planned, as everyone knows she never does anything for no reason. Unfortunately, the situation has become extremely complicated in the last few hours, and now, it has become incredibly difficult to make the right decision. Eileen is sure that no matter what she says to the twins, they will take those words as an attempt to hurt them, or worse, deceive them. She finds herself in the most desperate situation, and it seems that there is no way out. Everything is so bad that even her children have stopped trusting her. If only she could turn back the clock, she would never have had such an important conversation just on the street. It was her biggest mistake. All the effort she had put into building trust with the children was just in vain. It was all destroyed in a matter of minutes. After a while, to at least distract herself a little and stop thinking about it, she went to a store near her house. As soon as the girl stepped inside, and was immediately greeted by the same snow-white animal she met here last time. Thanks to him, the girl's mood improved at least a little, and she even began to smile. Eileen realized for the first time that pets really did help calm her down, even in such difficult situations when it seemed like nothing else could help. After that, she got right down to business. Since they had decided that they were going to the party after all, it was necessary to prepare what they were going to go there with. Usually at such a party there is a charity exhibition. Nobles sell different drinks and food, and sometimes some jewelry or special things. It is a very famous and popular event to which famous personalities are usually invited. All the money you make at the party will be donated to the needy, and the best part is that the commodity which manages to sell the most expensive becomes the object of the year. Accordingly, everyone wants to invent such a commodity so that it becomes such a commodity. It turns out that in the original story, Eileen put the prince's grape juice up for sale, and it was sold for pennies, and spilled on the floor in front of the children. The girl remembers this moment perfectly well, and realizes that she will definitely not act in such a way, and will do everything possible to renew trusting relationships. Eileen looked carefully at the goods provided, and was a little confused. It became very difficult to choose something suitable, and at the same time, interesting. Since she didn't like the desserts in this world at all, the girl realized that she had to choose something else. The thing is that almost everyone invited to the party are close or acquaintances of the Empress, so you need to prepare something more spectacular than just sweets from the store. At the same time, the girl decided to choose something that would simultaneously cause a lot of outrage and, at the same time, surprise everyone in attendance. When suddenly, the animal started running away, and at first glance, there was no reason for it. Eileen immediately ran after him and thought that maybe he had something interesting to show her. Meanwhile, they found themselves near some counter with different drinks. The girl was in this department for the first time and didn't understand what could be appropriate here. After a bit of thinking and looking around, she finally realized that she seemed to have found what she needed after all. She was so happy about it that she didn't even notice the presence of a human nearby. Eileen approached the animal. She took his hands in hers and began to thank him for his help, very curious as to what she saw that was so appropriate, and also who this person is that is watching them at this moment. Unsuspecting, she continued to look at the selected items and eagerly imagined the moment when she would finally put it on sale. After that, she let the lovely creature go and promised to come back to him soon and tell him how it had gone. Then the animal ran in which direction and saw something mesmerizing. And after that, there was a voice, and it was clearly a man's voice, if it was the same man who had been watching the girl from the side. What is happening is becoming less and less clear because this man has never been present before. And is he really the owner of this cute animal? This man has a peculiar appearance. He has blonde hair and unusual clothes. The animal seems to recognize him. It was even happy to see him and started smiling a lot, which meant that they definitely knew each other and were not seeing each other for the first time. Meanwhile, The day has arrived when the long-awaited party is about to begin, all taking place in a huge palace, and by the looks of it, there will be quite a few guests for sure. Probably all the most famous, influential, and rich people are invited here, for whom it is not a problem to leave a lot of money here and pay any amount for anything. In order not to be in a hurry and not to be late for such an important event, the girl and her assistant made sure to get ready on time and hit the road a little in advance. It was the right decision, and it turns out that most of the invitees did the same thing. When the girl rode in the carriage, she expected to be one of the first to arrive, but it turns out she was a little mistaken. Eileen tries her best to look as confident as possible, but the judgmental stares of those around her make her feel very uncomfortable. One of the twins sensed this immediately and surprisingly. He tried to remedy the situation and divert her attention away from those people. He got her attention and started asking her what she thought about his appearance. He really needs to get confirmation that he looks good. He doesn't go to a lot of these events, so getting compliments on his appearance is really important to him. He even confessed to her that when he notices the sheer number of people around him, he gets a little anxious and uncomfortable. To which the girl replied that it was quite normal, and most likely all those people around him were experiencing exactly the same sensations, so he didn't have to worry about it. Looking at the children's clothes, the girl thought for the first time that it would be a good idea to go shopping with them and buy clothes especially for such events. Since boys rarely leave the house, they have not yet had to buy clothes that are more dressy than what they are used to wearing at home. Plus, as it turns out, the boys are now in the exact costumes that the Duke recently gave them, which means that if it weren't for those gifts, they wouldn't have the right clothes to wear. Suddenly, right in the middle of the conversation, the girl did not even notice how her lover came up to her. He immediately complimented her and said that she looked very good. He looked at her with his usual loving gaze, only whether he did it for real or not, only he knows. The girl was so unexpecting to see him at this moment that instead of saying something in response, she began to admire his appearance and couldn't believe he was saying such words to her. She even noticed herself that as soon as he was around or said something, Eileen immediately blushed and became shy. She saw him in his new suit, wanted to compliment him, but as usual, she couldn't say anything. She's still hiding the fact that she admires his looks every time she sees him, and because of that, she's afraid he'll realize it sooner or later. Not to say anything unnecessary and not to seem like a girl who's crazy about him, silence is the only way to avoid mistakes and awkward situations. Meanwhile, the twin brothers had joined the conversation, one of them asking if Duke David would be with them today, to which the girl replied that she had forgotten to tell them about it. Eileen apologized for that and informed them that they would all be together today, as usual, an idea only one of them liked. After that, they continued to talk about some topics and looked forward to when the official start of the event would come. Then, Eileen finally calmed down and began to hope that there would be no more awkward situations today. But at one point, her excitement did kick in. The Duke started talking to the children and accidentally called one of them a little boy. But in reply, the prince at once answered him that very soon he would grow up and become taller than David, for this would only require waiting a few years. As a result, apparently due to his lack of experience with children, the Duke began talking to them as if they were adults, and sometimes his words started to sound too harsh. Maybe he didn't do it on purpose, but in any case, it looked like this. David seems to be seriously competing with these kids for Eileen's attention. He doesn't realize at all that the girl is replacing their birth mom to some extent, so his behavior is a bit inappropriate. She loves each of them equally, but that love is different, and the children seem to understand it even more than the Duke does. Unlike him, they at least know when to stop and at what point there might be a conflict. David sees them as children, although in fact, in some moments, without realizing it, it is he who looks like a child. With each passing minute, the awkwardness that the girl feels at this moment very much increases and becomes literally unbearable. The hardest thing in this situation is to stay calm and not show that she is very nervous at this moment, because now everyone is watching her. She not only has to behave accordingly, but she has to agree with every one of them. It's very tricky, given the fact that when she says something, it's very easy to anger or offend the Duke or the twins. It is obvious that they initially perceive each other as rivals, although they do not say it directly, but judging by their relationship and conversation, they will not be able to become friends anytime soon. At some point, the conversation hit a dead end. They just started looking at each other, which means an awkward silence is about to begin. And the annoying thing is that it's Eileen who feels guilty, even though she had almost no part in the conversation. And yet, it is when she looks into the eyes of one of the twins, who recently overheard their conversation with the Duke, that she feels the most stressed. Eileen no longer knows what and how she needs to do to fix all these misunderstandings and stop feeling guilty about it. At this point, David suggested not to think about anything and just enjoy the atmosphere of the event, because in any case, everyone would soon find out about it anyway. He was tired of standing in one place and figuring out some misunderstandings, because that could be done any other day. And now they were here to spend this time with pleasure. The brothers looked at him, and they seemed to absolutely agree with these words. No one knows when the day will come again, when it will be possible to attend such a celebration. Now it is really better not to think about any problems, because they have a great opportunity to rest and not think about anything bad. Eileen, of course, realizes that the guy is right, but at the same time, she has too many worries and thoughts that make it impossible to relax. The girl tried to focus. She remembered that in the original story, he had started a continental conflict over the main character. And the worst thing that could happen according to the story is someone destroys the twins, and it's going to happen soon. So in order to protect the children and end this fake relationship, we need to find a new lover for the Duke as soon as possible. It may not be easy, but for the safety of the children, a girl will do anything. She won't let anyone hurt them, much less in the way the plot would have it happen. Meanwhile, they finally went inside the mansion, where they were examined from the first seconds by all the guests present. Absolutely everyone was looking in their direction, and didn't even hide how interested they were in watching this couple. They didn't even have to make any special effort to hear everyone around them talking. They didn't even try to keep their conversations down, so the guy and girl wouldn't hear a thing. I get the impression that all these people came here just to make sure their relationship was real. Many have only heard rumors that these two will soon be husband and wife, and finally, they have the chance to see if it's true. Except that they only wanted to make sure of it in order to start discussing and spreading new rumors again. Absolutely no one sincerely rejoiced and congratulated them on the upcoming event. In order for the girl to ignore these people and not worry about their opinion, the guy came close to her and said that if anyone dared to offend her, he would immediately regret it very much. It is simply unacceptable for him to silently watch when his future wife is being insulted or humiliated in front of many people, especially if someone does it on purpose. As soon as Eileen heard those words, she was very pleased. But the realization that she would be meeting the Empress very soon made her uncomfortable, as suddenly, the prince turns to her and tries to draw attention to himself. Apparently, he wants to ask her for something. He wants to ask to go away and play something. The boy met children his own age and wanted to meet them, but as they are on the other side of the hall, he had to ask the nanny for permission. Surprisingly, only now the girl noticed that some guests came to this event with their children. Need friends among peers, of course. She does not mind, and on the contrary will be very happy if the boys will find new friends for themselves, because it will be really wonderful. Immediately afterward, the girl turned to her assistant and asked her to come closer, for she had in her bag something that seemed like it might come in handy at this moment. Eileen, she started a box of cookies from there, which I'm sure the rest of the kids will really enjoy, and will certainly help the boys make friends with someone. They will be able to treat someone to these cookies, and thus create a good impression of themselves, which is very important. She told them it was a treat they could share with their friends, or other kids who wanted a treat. Twins girl for such a gift, because it will be so much easier to make friends with someone. It's a really good idea. But before letting them leave, Eileen asked that if anyone dared to offend them, that they tell her right away. And of course she asked them to always stay together and not stray too far from each other, This is very important for safety reasons. As we know, there are too many people around who would love to hurt the twins, and with their help, want to manipulate their nanny or duke. As soon as the children ran away to do their business, the guy and the girl immediately felt the presence of a person whose energy made everyone around them stop laughing and behave more calmly. The fact is that the empress appeared in the hall. Even now she looked at the guests with a look as if they had come without her invitation and were interfering with her rest. The woman immediately started looking among the invitees for the right person, and of course she wanted Eileen. After just a few minutes, she managed to find the girl among the guests. She started to look her straight in the eyes. Because of this, Eileen has a terrible sense of dread. But luckily, she has David by her side who can protect her in case of an emergency. And as soon as this woman started down the stairs, a sense of uneasiness and apprehension appeared not only in the girl, but even in the rest of the invited guests. They also began to get very agitated. It became very noticeable that before her arrival, they were much calmer and more pleasant to be here. The Empress is such a horrible and cruel person that even in situations where she just keeps quiet and does nothing, people have the urge to say goodbye and go home. Even the sight of that man makes you feel like she wants to destroy everyone in this room. As strange as it may sound, the meaning of these words and emotions can only be understood by the people she once took revenge on and those who knew her. And the most terrible thing, which is still not believed by most people, the Empress is even capable of destroying a man, whose complicity and guilt no one has not even proven. She has always been free to act. She has never been forbidden to do anything. She is capable of absolutely anything. And basically, she wants only one thing: to ruin someone's life, which she is already trying to do in relation to the Duke and his lover. And all because the girl the Duke has chosen to marry her can't become her personal spy, and the Empress can't get rid of David with her help. This is of course impossible to believe, but unfortunately, the reality is really true. The woman wants to get rid of not only the Duke, but also the girl just because they can't cooperate and can't be on the same page. After whispering something to her assistant, the woman sent her off to scout and ordered her to talk to Eileen. She approached them, and instead of greeting the guests or asking how they were feeling, she started asking strange questions. Namely, what they were doing here. But at that moment, David answered. Instead of Eileen, he gave her a chance to calm down and explained that he couldn't send his beloved alone to such a dangerous place. He bought the invitation and thus got a pass to the event. And at this moment, the girl heard this information for the first time. She was very much surprised, but at the same time, tried to pretend as if she knew everything about everything.